What?
She whined.
She squeaked.
We're live. Cheech's dog is making noise.
She's a squeaker.
Sure. She's going to be here for like 0.5 seconds before she goes back to the kennel.
Look, there's the famous Squatch dog.
Squatch dog on the counter? That looks dangerous.
Yep.
Squatch, you're going to hurt yourself.
We had to introduce the Squatch dog. She's the new shop dog, but...
For all the podcasters, she's a little puppy.
Yep. She's a little wire-haired pointing Griffon, 10 weeks old. She has an Instagram, the Squatch dog. There. All right. She's going to the kennel before we start this Stillwater talk.
Bye, Squatch dog.
Say hi. She's like, no.
Hi.
She'll chew on Lance.
She's been pretty good the last couple of days. She hasn't been chewing much.
Good girl.
Well, good. Let's light up the chat box here,
Watch.
peoples. While we start, we're going to talk about Stillwater tonight, and mostly Q&A, but we've got some topics we'll throw out there as well.
Famous Dr. Pepper.
We got the soda.
We're still waiting for Dr. Pepper to
Endorsement.
send us our first free case.
Am I the only one that has Dr. Pepper right now, though?
Yeah,
I've got
I had one of those earlier.
Mountain Dew.
Lightweights. Yeah, but we're just going to talk about, what is it? It's third week in April.
Mm-hmm.
Ice is starting to come off in some of the lower elevation lakes. We're going to have a bunch more ice off coming, so we got Stillwater on the brain.
Lots of it.
Yeah, if you saw our Instagram post, that was a great picture of Mr. Lance Egan.
No, there's no such thing as a great picture of me. Does not exist.
Yeah. Somebody says, Cheech's fresh cut is looking very stylish. It's actually...
He did it himself.
a lot
Kobe is
cooler,
being
too.
incredibly generous.
Oh, Kobe's a gentleman and a scholar, and you have earned yourself 3 golden stars, redeemable for absolutely nothing. So
Yes, James, that is water next to me.
Yeah. So, if you have questions about Stillwater, specifically like early season Stillwater, maybe we can tackle that subject. So put them in the comments on the old YouTubes, and we'll tackle them a little bit. But back in the day, when we used to get all amped up for Stillwater, we lived and died for ice off.
Yep. It was the best.
It was like the ultimate. And we don't do that much anymore. Why is that?
So I think as we fished it a lot more, I don't know, Lance, what you think, but I kind of find ice off isn't necessarily all that much better than any other time of the year. In fact, it can be almost sketchier, like as maybe more inconsistent would be a good word for it.
Yeah, it has to be well timed.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you can hit it just right, and I mean, we've certainly had some days on what I'd call within a day or two of ice off on some Stillwaters that were really good, but for me, I think the prime time is once the chironomids start to really get going.
Yeah, usually a couple weeks maybe after ice out.
I think that, on the lakes, a lot of times rainbows and cuts are thinking about spawning that time of year, and you get fish that are kind of beat up and mushy. I much prefer fishing them when they're eating more natural food sources.
I think part of the ice off draw is it's a great time for those that don't have watercraft of some sort to get out and catch some fish, because it pushes fish to the banks. It's the first open water. So it's a great opportunity for a wading angler that doesn't have a boat, a flow tube, a pontoon to get on the lake and get after some fish.
Yeah, and and everybody I talk to in this ice off, all you do is you cast your fly onto the ice and then you pull it into the water.
I literally told
you
someone
can do
that today. What's wrong with that?
There is nothing wrong with that. I just
Nothing
think
at all.
that everybody says that.
We was up there, and if you just threw up there with an egg-sucking leech and you just let it pull down, don't pull it very fast because them fish
Let her
just
sink.
cruising. The egg-sucking leech will get them.
But it's fun. I mean, Strawberry Reservoir here in Utah is getting a lot more ice free. That's a good one if you want to fish from shore. Lots of areas, once it starts to come off, you can just get in. Fish are going to be shallower. In fact, they kind of stay shallower because they're cutthroats and they stage to spawn. It'll be a little Not all of them, but a lot in closer. So if you want to hit something like that, it's a good time of year to do it.
The other thing is when they're that shallow, if you've got a box full of tungsten flies, they might get down a little bit too fast. So
yeah,
there was a time where I'd have a box for ice off that are a little bit less weighted. Still like an egg sucking leech, but not a bead head for the
maybe a glass bead or just a thread hotspot.
That reminds me, I do have some glass bead chronomids I have on my list.
Gotta have some of those.
Unweighted, glass beaded, tungsten beaded.
Nerd alert.
Yes.
Here's a good one. Thoughts on sink tip versus full sink when fishing Stillwater?
Good question.
And that ties into lines for early season. It's a good time of year to go through all your fly lines, make sure they have fresh knots, maybe change out some of your leaders, that kind of stuff. But sink tip versus full sink.
Well, sink tip's pretty broad, right? I mean, technically a midge tip is a sink tip. It's just a very short, very slow sinking midge tip. Generally, the sink tips that you would use in a river for streamer fishing, I don't like for Stillwater much. Not that you can't use them, but they create
kind of limited
a real hinge point too. Or if you're stripping streamers and things with them, I prefer a sinking line that instead of pulling kind of up all the time towards the floating section of the line is pulling more horizontal. If you're fishing chronomids or calabatus or damsels or things that you might fish on a midge tip where you're fishing very slow, then the sinking portion of the midge tip is only usually 3 to 5, maybe 6 feet long, and it sinks very slowly, and you're basically crawling lightweight stuff. So a sink tip can be useful, but really just the midge tip is all I take in a sink tip on Stillwater. Otherwise, they're all floating or various densities of sinking lines.
Yeah, I think we did on the 8-weight the last couple of years have thrown the SA Titan sink tip. Was that?
It's like a clear tip.
So it's a very kind of a hybrid,
slow,
intermediate running line with the clear tip, or is it a floating running line?
Floating running line with a clear tip. They discontinued that line, but the idea was when we're fishing those little minnows over the top of weed beds, we still wanted to maintain, the glide, the depth, but not get too far down into the weeds. So But I mean, the thing about it is the days of just sink tip versus full sink are over.
Oh yeah.
I think that especially with the SA lines, you have seamless density lines where they have a type 3 and type 5 in the same line, or a triple density where they have 3 different sink densities in the same line, or a parabolic line. There's so many different lines that you can fish now for Stillwaters, and I think this year we've pledged to maybe do more instructional videos.
We do,
on the lines.
We're planning some, and also float tube videos. We're working with Outcast to do some of those.
Yeah,
and we'll take you along with us and kind of show you what we do.
Speaking of that 8-weight, there's a question on here on the NRX versus Sage X for Stillwater.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, boy, you can't make a bad selection there.
It's
right?
like drinking Dr. Pepper or Pepsi, both delicious.
Well, it's like lamb and tuna fish over here. I don't think, Jace, that I'm with Curtis. There's no wrong answer there. You could do either one. We really enjoy the Sage X in a 10-foot-6, and we also really enjoy the NRX Plus in the 10-6. Another question on here is, what is your go-to Stillwater rod? What is the length and weight? You mentioned an 8-weight a minute ago for specific techniques, but if you had to pick one rod, I think we would all agree it would probably be a 10-foot-6 weight.
100%. Yep.
Curtis and I both are fishing the Orvis H3 10-foot-6 weight, the H3F, and it's a phenomenal rod. I mean, we have beat those things to death.
We've taken them all over. We do have the Sage X 10-foot-6 weight as well, and that one's awesome as well.
And we've thrown the NRX Plus LP, or the NRX Plus 10-foot-6 weight, and I've never fished it, but just by throwing it, that it's going to be
knowing it, if it says NRX or Asquith on it, it's going to be a really good rod.
Good one.
Yeah.
What else?
Lance mentioned something that made me think of something. Now I can't remember.
Something that made you think of something. That's very specific. While you're processing that, Cody says, on my Stillwater ride, I have a Lamson 3-pack. By the way, that's a great way to get into
that's
reels
like
with extra spools.
Out of the people that come in the shop or online to ask us those questions, that's like the best way to get into Stillwater.
Yeah,
because you will need more than one line.
Yeah, so he's got a floating line. He's got an emerger tip, which is the scientific angler's midge tip, essentially. Yep. What would the third spool be? If it were me, I'd get the parabolic line because it's such a good searching line. But you might also consider like a type or like a seamless density type 3-5 or something like that.
Something that gets down a little quicker.
What would you say, Lance?
I would get a 3.
Yeah, type 3. It's a very versatile line.
Yeah. Yeah, there's another question that kind of ties into that too. It was up a little bit. Let's see. It was if you had to recommend one lake rod and a few lines to a beginner Stillwater angler, what would those rod and lines be?
Yeah.
So 10-foot 6 weight, regardless of brand or model or what have you. You could also do a 7. 7s are fairly popular. You need to gauge it a little bit on where you're fishing. We fish some relatively large lakes for, our favorite places mentioned is probably Strawberry nearby, where the average cuts are probably 18 inches is probably a good conservative average. You catch 17 inches now and then, but you catch a lot of like 18 to 20, 21 inch fish.
So a
6 is really nice for that. If you're chasing trout that are quite a bit smaller, you may not need a 6, maybe a 10-foot 5. But a 6 would be a good way to go. And then line wise, I think Stillwater, for me, the base would be floating, intermediate, I would say 3, 5, and 7. I know that doesn't sound basic because it's 5 lines, but that's cutting out a lot of lines that I use a lot. A midge tip would be next on that list for me, but I use a midge tip personally more than I use my 5 or my 7. So depending on where you fish, how you fish, you can adjust that. But I guess I would say a floating, a midge tip, some sort of intermediate, a 3, 5, and 7 would be really core. And then if you added one more, a sweep or a parabolic line to really cover lots of different depths.
And I think going along with that, and it is a tough one for us because that's a lot of money.
It is.
Right? And so, if you can't afford, and I'd say get them in that order, so if you did, in my opinion, go prepared with, say, 3 lines. That would be kind of almost a minimum. You could maybe get away with 2. But spool or reel and spool, the liquids, it's really, really hard to beat the liquid.
Yeah, liquid or remix 3-packs.
3-packs,
yeah. Those are fantastic.
And then rods, Echo has the new Lago and Stillwater rods.
Yeah, those are nice.
And they're really good rods for a pretty good price. Echo's value
that's
bang
their
for
whole,
the buck. They're good with that.
For sure.
Another good option in kind of the mid-range is the IMX Pro from G. Loomis. We've fished the 9.5-foot 6 weight quite a bit on both Stillwater and rivers. So
and
if you
the Recon too.
And the Recon,
They don't come in 10-footers, but 9.5's really good Stillwater length as well.
Excellent. And those could double as a streamer rod. So
totally.
If you wanted to do both of those and kind of save your pennies, that's a good way to do that.
Yeah, we've done those quite a bit. So back to the early spring theme of really cold water. When do the fish really start getting active, Lance, in your opinion, as far as like eating normal stuff? Maybe talk about that and when the lake turns over and how that affects fishing.
Well, turnover, if you get it in the lakes you fish, is usually about 38, 39 degrees Fahrenheit, where the surface is at its densest point and it sinks to the bottom. I don't see it a lot on really deep lakes, some of our really deep canyon lakes. You'll see it in shallows, but not the whole lake. Hard to say for sure if everybody else across. I fish lots of other places around the country and around the world, but not always at that time of year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I couldn't relate, to what everybody else encounters there. But turnover certainly makes it a little tough if you get that because it's a little bit murky, and that happens a lot right at ice out because the water warms really quickly after it thaws and. Anyway, it makes it a little bit murky. Maybe try some darker flies. But I think the most, or brighter flies, fabs and stuff. But I think the most activity starts probably around 50 degrees, somewhere in there. I figure Stillwaters are at their prime for trout between about 50 and 60, 65, somewhere in there. You start getting above 65 and starts getting, low oxygen can be lethal for the fish. But, really more like 68, 70 is really troubling. But 65, the fish are in They're just in
They're
go mode.
ready to go. And so what you're saying is a thermometer maybe is a good Stillwater
Yeah,
tool.
or if you're fishing out of a boat, a fish finder, of course, would have the temperature there. Or if not, you can get a thermometer and check a surface temp real easy.
I find so we fish from a boat, and Lance does as well most of the time with some sort of fish finder.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're always looking at depth and temperature, even from spot to spot, to say, oh, we were at 55 degrees over there in 30 feet of water, and then the bite shut off or something. So, and you don't have to have something fancy. You can just have those little handheld thermometers, but it's important to keep track of that, because a lot of times I've seen that's like all the difference.
Yeah, at ice off, you can sometimes find a bay that's 2 or 3 degrees warmer than surrounding areas, and that will be significantly faster fishing.
Yeah, speaking of watercraft, somebody says, how do you like your fly craft on larger Stillwater bodies?
So we fished it on not really large. It's certainly doable. It has the capability to mount a motor to it, like a real 5 or 10 horsepower or something.
Yeah,
maybe.
I think they mostly do 2.5 to maybe 4 or 5 horsepower.
So pretty small, but you could do it. I mean, we've fished on boats for a lot of years, so it certainly can do Stillwater, and not our first choice because we've got other options. But
if it's your only way to get out there, it'd be a
do
good
it,
one.
yeah.
But I would argue the flycrafts we love, but they're really more of a river boat.
Yeah.
Can they be used on lakes? Yes, they absolutely can. The disadvantage to anything like that, a raft, a canoe, whatever, when you're trying to fly fish, is that you can paddle into position, and then as soon as you make a cast this way, the wind spins you this way or that way, and you don't have control. So if you're not fishing in a boat where you have either a trolling motor or a drogue or something to control the direction of the boat, then you should probably use, I would recommend, a float tube or a pontoon, and you need to have fins. Leave the oars. If you're going to leave your fins or your oars home, leave your oars home, because you need the fins.
Yeah.
The fins control the boat. You make a cast and you can still control line and strip and set the hook and manage the fish with your hands, and kick and control the boat with your feet. Where if you take a pontoon boat and just have oars, you're really up a creek.
Well,
Even if you put a trolling motor on your pontoon boat, what I found is, I used to do that quite a bit. I think everybody used to have a pontoon boat with a trolling motor on it. But you just have it set to go straight behind you and use your feet to steer. So
if you're going to troll with the trolling motor.
Yeah, you see a lot of guys going out there with a pontoon boat and a trolling motor, and they try to go forward, and they got their Air Monarchs on that are still crispy. They don't want to get them wet. So, and in that case, you're either choosing to fish or to navigate, not both. It's tough, but yeah. But yeah, we have a variety of options, high mountains with a personal watercraft. We even have a trolling motor set up for our drift boat for some lakes that we can fish. And then if you can fish out of the comfortable Cadillac boat, it's money. Lance actually just got a pretty sweet...
Mine's more like a Toyota Camry boat than a Cadillac, but it'll work.
Well, you had to go Toyota there.
Good catch.
Yeah, the Toyota will run forever.
Good catch. Yeah. What else do we have in here? We have don't forget
Midge Tip from shore.
Midge Tip from shore works great. Yeah.
Yeah. So what can you do to make that easier? Because like back casting can be tough because sometimes you have an angle going up. And then stripping basket. Maybe Curtis can talk about his experience with the Flexi stripper.
The Flexi stripper from Arex. That thing's killer. So I used it for...
borderline game changer.
Yeah, it really is, especially if you're fishing from shore. You don't want your lines to get chewed up in the rocks and get all dirty. You have to clean them every time. So, we sell it on the website. It's called the Arex... what's it called?
Yeah, Arex Flexi
stripper.
Yeah, so it's basically
don't Google just plain Flexi stripper, especially if you put it in 2 words.
Cheech has found.
Yeah,
I fished it from.
Never mind.
From a boat, raft, and shore, and it's really, really good. So if you're going to fish from shore and that sort of thing, so those they're They're really easy. You just put them together, and it has little plastic kind of rubberish spikes that come out of it, and they're flexible. You just strap it on your waist and strip right into it. It holds the line really well, and it shoots.
Oh yeah,
fine, like no tangles.
You fished out of a raft with a frame
with a ton of stuff that would get caught on the line if you
Yeah.
didn't. Yeah, that thing was just so killer.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Someone says, thinking about a canoe. How do you feel about canoe fly fishing?
I kind of think it's the same way with Lance was saying, that the trouble with a canoe or a kayak or anything that has really not a good way to fish and steer at the same time. If it's at all windy, you will cast and it's going to start to turn you, which you don't necessarily want. You want to be in contact with your line as you're stripping it in and letting it sink. I just don't like that style.
Yeah, I'm with you. Canoes are great because they paddle quickly. They cover water quickly. But the best way to fly fish out of a canoe, I think, is to never mind.
Flip it upside down on the shore and
leave
use
it on. No, but really, if you want to use a canoe, I would say if you can, bring somebody else to paddle it for you, so you can take turns and one person controls where it is and the other one is actually fishing, because you just can't very. I mean, if it's dead calm, maybe, but
like when we go out, I make Cheech and drive us around everywhere.
Yeah, of course, naturally.
With the Minn Kota Ultrex.
But canoe's not very stable. It's not. Is it tolerable? I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what you have.
If you're going to troll, I guess it would be tolerable to troll out of a canoe if you had a little rod holder on it. The way that we're kind of pushing the way that we don't like to troll very much. We like to cast and retrieve flies, so we're kind of pushing, I guess, that on people. But if you like to troll, then a canoe wouldn't be terrible.
Yeah, but the other thing is, anytime you're in a watercraft, safety is a major concern. Curtis and I actually invested in some pretty nice life jackets because
we've had some close calls in some pretty crappy boats over the years.
We got something that we can just wear the whole time we're on the boat. So that's kind of the rule now. If you're on the boat, you got a life jacket on.
Preserver, yeah.
But
you just don't want to take chances.
The thing about a canoe is if you're fishing with two people in a canoe and one person leans one way and one the other, then you're toast. Yeah. And especially this time of year, if you end up in the water, in that cold water, it's no
rough.
bueno. Even if you can swim to shore.
Last year on Strawberry, was it last year? two guys, I don't know what kind of boat. It wasn't like a canoe, but they were in a boat, and
sort of
near as can be estimated, they were netting a fish kind of together, and both leaned and fell over as they were getting the fish.
They're not really sure.
They don't know, but you got to be careful out there. Anywho, I think what else we got here?
Do you do?
Best all-around rod for lakes. We touched on that a bit. There's lots of rod models, and we sell a ton of different models, so we're not necessarily brand specific. We fish Sage X, Orvis Helios, but Echo has some more economical options there too. Fly fish for bass and other species, absolutely.
Yeah, they're awesome.
We have been known to throw in conventional gear in some cases.
Dude, conventional gear is
it's a whole nother world.
Jam. I love it.
Yeah, it's fun. I eventually got converted over to it a few years ago. When it's a good, sometimes it's best.
Squatch whining.
That dog of yours.
Blasted puppy.
Here's a good question from our friend Pablito. What are the first things you look for when you get to the lake? Structure, wind? All of the above. In lakes that we're at, we kind of know some of the places where we like to go, so we know the structure and overall sort of depth. But you can look at the slope of the bank to kind of gauge how deep areas may be, especially if you don't have a fish finder. Nobody likes to really fish in the wind a ton. Sometimes it's a little helpful.
I love it. Dude, I'm such a good caster.
45 mile an hour winds.
You should see, I can take an Echo base, and it's just like a Sage X to me. Dude.
Yes,
I've been
I'm sure that it is.
Anyway.
First things you see at a lake, that's a complex question because it depends on where you are. But I would I would say we're back to water temperature first. You need to know, are you expecting fish deep? Or are you expecting them shallow? If you're there when it's calm, I like to look at where there's concentrations of rising fish, because that can tell you where there are lots of fish just by seeing where they're feeding. Are there weed beds? Are there parts of the lake that are slick and parts that are textured? Mm-hmm. If you want to catch fish, I would recommend finding textured water. It's funny.
Lake points.
Yeah, lake points, weed edges, drop-offs for sure. It depends on the lake and what their forage is. It's kind of hard to just blanket statement that kind of question, but those are the kinds of things you're looking for. And by the way, if you're fishing Stillwater, it's amazing how often people come in and they say, I was up on Lake X, whatever it is, and it was the best day ever. It was bluebird, flat calm. It should have just been awesome, and the fishing was terrible. And you're like, no, you just described like hell in a Stillwater. That is the worst conditions for Stillwater. Bright sun, no wind, you go home.
Yeah,
you want some
wind.
It
super tough.
You don't want too much wind, but you need some. Got to have some wind. A little bit of overcast conditions would be good too.
Yeah.
Someone's asking about flies. What do you start out fishing when you're on a lake? Do you start small and then go big, or the other way around?
Well, one thing we get a lot of people in the shop that kind of equate big Stillwater, bigger fish, therefore throw big streamers and that sort of thing. Certainly can work, but if you looked in our fly boxes, you're not going to see a ton of really big stuff. So, when I think big, I'm thinking maybe a size 8 leech or bugger or something like that.
8 or 6 is big for a big box.
And minnows, even with our minnow patterns at Strawberry, we're fishing baby fats and low fats, and those are 8s and 10s, and even in that range. So, and we were talking about this with one of the guys in the shop today when it comes to like chironomids, which constitute a huge portion of a trout's diet, and they're relatively small for a big lake. 14s, 12s, 10s, even smaller sometimes. But yet fish find them.
Yeah.
Lance fishes lake trout, char, a lot, and he obviously isn't fishing chironomids for him. But, you had one that coughed up, and it wasn't a huge fish.
It was not a huge laker, but I've talked to biologists, and he says he finds, in their nets, he finds, 30-pound fish that are coughing up chironomids.
Yeah.
The laker I caught the other day, it was maybe 3.5 pounds, I think, but it was chironomids coming out of its gills.
Yeah. So fish can find them. Don't be shy to throw small, like relatively small stuff.
No.
Yeah.
No, most stuff though, I think it would be fair to say, chironomids and things, maybe 10s to 16s is about as small as I usually get. I always have a few micro, little zebras and things, but I rarely even fish 16s, 10s, 12s, 14s for me.
Yeah, same
And
here.
then streamers, I fish a lot of 10s and 12s again, sometimes 8s, 6s, 4s, 2s for a minnow, but you got to base it again on where you're fishing.
Yeah, the one exception is at Strawberry we have a lot of cutthroat that are pretty aggressive. So I do have a few flies in my box that are pretty big.
Like the gold slider.
Yeah, gold slider. Yeah, the articulated trout slider is money on Stillwaters. But yeah, by and far we do not throw a lot of articulated stuff on lakes. Leaders. They're asking about leaders.
Suppose we should be do a video on our leader setups, because we build our own for the most part.
Yeah, but maybe we can give a rundown. Since Lance taught us, maybe we can have him give us a rundown of a good Stillwater leader.
The leader, again, it depends on how you're fishing, but since I do most of my fishing more lock style from a boat or a pontoon or a flow tube, but casting with wind at my back and then retrieving flies rather than trolling them, I tend to build a very short, abbreviated butt section. So same thing we use on midge tips, I use on all my sinking lines. So I just take a little bit of 20-pound fluorocarbon, maybe 20 inches, 24 inches, and I nail knot that to the fly line.
No loops.
No loops.
I do declare that you shall cut off your
Loop free.
loops. All right,
Anyway, no loops. Blood knot that to a little bit of 15-pound fluorocarbon. I use Seagarn and Vizex personally, but you could use any fluorocarbon you like. Then a tippet ring. I usually use a 2 or 1.5 millimeter tippet ring, and then just run straight 3x, 2x, 1x,
Whatever,
4x, whatever you might from there, depending on the conditions and which size flies you're throwing. So it's, a couple feet of 20, maybe a foot and a half of 15 tippet ring, and then you just adjust from there. I usually fish 3-fly rigs. We can do that here in Utah. You can't do that everywhere. So if you need to adjust down to 1 or 2 flies, you might change yours a little bit. If you're fishing a floating line, then I would change that if you're fishing dries or drying a dropper. But if you're fishing nymphs, I use that same system again.
Yeah.
The advantage of not using a regular tapered leader is a regular tapered leader has 60% of it that's butt section. So even if you buy a 9-footer, you're getting almost 6 feet of it that's
Thick.
That's 30-pound test, and that doesn't sink very well. It tends to retain memory, so you don't have good sensitivity, and we don't want any of that. And in Stillwater, we want to usually get down pretty quickly. So we go, most of our leader is thin tippet, and being able to fish with the wind at your back, you don't need the thick butt section to help kick that leader over because the wind's going to carry it for you.
Yeah.
And
Now,
go ahead.
If it's related to leaders, we could do. I wanted to circle back around. Lance mentioned lock style. We get that question. What does that mean? And I think it's
a good question.
It's an important thing because it's a method that is pretty popular in the UK and Europe. Maybe not so much here, but
definitely not.
Lance has done it quite a bit in competitions. But why don't you explain?
Yeah, and
that?
out of competitions too. It's my favorite way to fish Stillwater. Well, it's just we're fishing out of a boat most of the time, right?
Yep.
And you're fishing with the boat sideways, so it's broadside to the wind, and you're casting with the wind at your back, and you attach a drogue to the bow and the stern of the boat, and the drogue is basically a giant underwater parachute, if you will, that slows the drift of the boat down, so you can stay in contact and when you're stripping and stay in contact to set the hook and everything else. It's a great way to cover water. If you find fish are in a particular depth, you find about that depth in a bay, and you set up a drift that makes it so you stay in about that, within a few feet of that depth all the way across the bay, and you just keep casting and covering water and catching fish. You can do similar things from a float tube or a pontoon, where by just kicking very slowly, so you're not trying to actually go against the wind, you're still moving and covering water, but you're kicking just enough to slow your drift down, to slow you're not getting blown at the same speed as the wind would blow you without your fins. So that's, in a nutshell, you're casting with the wind at your back and usually fishing multiple flies, 2 or 3 flies, and covering lots of water.
Yep. Very effective. Kind of opens up a new technique and method for fishing. Didn't realize how cool it was until
really
we tried
fun.
it.
Yeah, fun way to fish.
And granted, we use a trolling motor a lot when we're out on the lakes. The true way to do it's drogue style. We have one, but we use the trolling motor a ton.
Yeah, trolling motor's good to cover banks or something,
right.
but not so much for
large
lock style if you're just going to cover a bay.
Yeah. Steve Quinn has a good question. During ice-off, with the cold water, are the fish generally going to be lethargic or fast and aggressive?
Well, they're going to be relatively more lethargic at lower temperatures, but they still will need to eat, and so you can catch them.
They're still pretty pissed off when you do hook them.
They'll fight. You definitely see a difference when the water hits kind of those magic temps. But
they can be lethargic for sure. It's cold, but trout are cold water fish, so they handle that pretty well. I think that it's worth mentioning that generally speaking, at ice-off, it's best to move flies slow. These are generalizations. There's no hard. If you at ice-off, there's a bunch of minnows in the shallows with the trout. Well, they'll chase minnows, so you could strip fast at times. But just a general rule, slowing down is good at ice-off. Versus when the water temps get 50 to 60, sometimes you can't move flies fast enough.
Yeah,
that's true.
Lots of fun
Been there.
What else?
I think the theme also to understand, if you haven't tried Stillwater fly fishing, it's something else. It's awesome.
Yeah, the funny thing is, there are trout or fish in general in so many different lakes that you wouldn't think of,
And it opens up so much more to you than, rivers are fun.
They're way fun.
There's a question here, do we prefer fishing rivers or Stillwater?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. We'll do whatever's best. We like
to pick one or the other, do we? We like both.
Yeah, sometimes in the same day.
Here's one of the things that I like about Stillwater so much, especially having a watercraft where you can get out and move around. let's say on Strawberry Reservoir, arguably the most fished body of water in the whole state.
Yeah.
Even if you go and the parking lot is just packed with people, you're still going to be able to get away from people. You're still going to be able to find a spot and fish. That's what I like about Stillwater. Whereas if you go to a secret stream where you really want to go fish it and it's quiet water, if someone gets there before you and they've walked up that stream, you're screwed.
Goodbye.
You just drove 3 hours for nothing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So Stillwater, you can get out there even if there are a ton of people and still catch a bunch of fish. So,
and in general, this is generalization, the fish are larger. You're gonna find some larger fish. And then talk about high mountain streams or lakes, and while they may not be gigantic, there are some pretty big ones up there. But you can get into quantity. You can get in. Give it a try. I mean, there's
brookies, tigers, grayling, rainbows, all
Cutthroat.
types of cutthroat. Hybrids. You can do so many different species as well.
Yeah.
So that's cool. People are asking about fly patterns. Somebody says, Cheech, what's your favorite chronomid pattern? I hate to admit it, but the stupid silver lancer, which is the chronomid Frenchie, but I call it the silver lancer because that's exactly what it is. No, that fly is phenomenal. There's something about that stupid fly that just catches fish.
Yeah, we have a tutorial for it on YouTube.
There's
Search it
a
up.
tutorial. Yep.
If you don't tie your own, hopefully it will be available in the coming months commercially too.
Yeah.
From Umpqua.
Yeah, and if you can get your hands on some melanistic pheasant, even
hold on
fun.
to it.
Yeah,
and if not,
get it.
We got muskrat gray.
Muskrat gray is the closest thing. But that for me, that pattern, I think I've caught fish almost everywhere I fish. I don't ever tell Lance when I do though, because he gets a big head.
Yeah, I knew that was going there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. What about you guys?
Yeah, I like the chronomid. If you're doing chronomids, chronomid Frenchie, good old ice cream cone, just black and red ice cream cone's really good. It's black and silver humongous. I like a lot. I fish a lot of black with chartreuse heads.
Oh yeah.
Chartreuse bead, rest of the fly black. Vary them at will. I like black and red leech patterns. What else? I mean, damsel. There's
Calabatus.
Yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of them. If you looked at one of our last YouTube videos, you saw some of our Stillwater boxes. You can maybe look at all of the colors in those as you go through it, and you'll see that that's a hard question to answer. It's not really.
Yeah.
It varies greatly depending on where you are and time of year and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even the blobs and boobies that I fish are different colors for different lakes.
Yeah, and they catch fish amazingly enough.
Well, if you sent them in, what's Lance's scent powder or scent sauce?
Mine, that's Tim Mickles.
No, Tim bought it for your birthday, so now it's yours.
It's love sauce.
It's called love sauce.
Nasty.
Lance's love sauce.
That's right. Do you fish chronomids with an indicator? Yes, sometimes we do.
But how much?
Not very much compared to how often we midge tip, but we still do.
Yeah. So why would you fish a midge tip versus an indicator for chronomids?
So one application I found that I think I would at least choose the midge tip first, but there's been a couple situations where we noticed fish were like a foot off the bottom, which to me says they're probably eating recently moved pupa from larva or actual larvae that are moving about. And they were like right in that zone. And the last time we moved, I switched over to from a midge tip to an indicator and put the fly right, the level I wanted it. Next cast, boom. So if you're fishing one depth and you want to consistently fish at that depth, and the conditions are right, and for us we knew the fish were kind of concentrated in one area, it was a little more efficient, I guess I could say, to get it there. But then again, last year when we were fishing a lake, the fish were liking more of the vertical retrieve on kind of a longer pause, so I would assume they're closer to the bottom with the midge tip. And as long as you got the count right, and they take chironomids right off the bottom like that. So I don't know, if you don't have a midge tip,
Indicator's a good way to go, or a dry
You can do
dropper.
'em,
To me, there's two instances that I can think of just off the top of my head where I think an indicator has an advantage. One is when the fish are really concentrated. Let's say they're in a spring that's 20 by 30 or something, and casting over the top of it and moving flies through it maybe isn't as efficient as just holding flies right in one place. Where you're not going to cover a bay like you could easily with a Midge Tip. You're not wanting to cover water. You're wanting to just throw flies in a very small area and hold them there. The indicator's an advantage. The other advantage I think an indicator or a dry dropper has is when it is flat calm, when the conditions are dire. When it's flat calm and you're fishing shallow enough that you would fish an indicator or Midge Tip, let's say 20 feet or less. Okay, I know you can, for those of you that are going to comment, I fish chronomids 30. I know you can fish chronomids deeper than that, but most of the time, 20 feet and less, you're going to fish chronomids. If it's flat calm and you consistently are casting your fly line and 2 or 3 flies out there and they hit the water, and it's absolutely flat, calm, and sunny in less than 20 feet of water, probably not a big deal. 15, 12, 10, 8, 7 feet of water,
Yeah, good point.
you just land your fly and all the fish go away. And the same thing happens with the indicator. However, when you throw it out there at the indicator, it then sinks and sits there. And 2 or 3 minutes later, it's still sitting there and the fish come back. So there's a time in those dire conditions where an indicator, I think, can be better than casting and retrieving constantly. That doesn't happen very often. Again, our lakes tend to have a lot of wind. But those are the two where I think the indicator has an advantage. It also has disadvantages, as we've seen on some really clear lakes where we can sight fish. You can hang chronomids below an indicator and watch the fish eat your fly, and the indicator doesn't move an inch.
And I've seen that on multiple occasions. Blew my mind. The first time it happened to me, I could see the fish down there. I was fishing from shore, and there was a little bit of current coming into the lake. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, they're just sitting there eating. So I had my indicator on throughout the flies. And I knew the depth, I could kind of see it right there. I could see my fly because I had a bright bead. I'd see it disappear, no movement on the indicator. I'm like, oh, he didn't take it. After a few of those floats, I'm like, there's something going on. So I started just setting the hook when I saw it disappear. Sure enough, fish on every time. Mm-hmm. And then we've seen that before too. And I'm just telling you that because that Midge Tip line has such good sensitivity on it, you get more fish. I think,
you're moving it, you're feeling it. I think there's the indicator. If a fish is swimming by and they eat it kind of at full speed, not full speed, but full swimming speed, and they eat it on the go, it's going to pull it under. The fish that don't, or the fish that come up and look at your chronomid or your calibatus or whatever and hang there for a second and then just nip at it like this, the indicator doesn't even budge, even in flat, calm water. Yeah. Where if you're moving it, you still feel that get tight.
Yeah, I mean, trout are very curious creatures, and they don't have hands to feel stuff. So they put stuff in their mouth all the time, and they detect fairly quickly whether or not it's food. Yeah. And, that high-carbon steel that Lance Egan is tying with on his fancy tying vise
super tasty.
Is not very soft like a chronomid.
Mark Memmott says, I'm a Phil Rowley disciple. I still love the indicator. Well, there's times and places for that. However, having fished with Phil a few times, I would tell you that he doesn't fish the indicator as much as I think.
Yeah, he calls
loves
it naked.
Fishing naked. Yeah, he does. He does fish an indicator.
I fish naked too.
Yeah, we don't want to know about that.
We try to not be around.
Don't Google that.
San Juan worms, guys.
10 or 15-foot Midge Tip. Neither 3 to 5, maybe 6-foot Midge Tip.
Boom! I said 3 to 6. Did I get it right?
Oh yeah, 3 to 6. Yes. I didn't see you responded.
No, that's good. And that's one thing that when we talk about Midge Tip, everyone's not everyone, but lots of customers will say, "Oh yeah, I've got a sink tip on my fly line." Well, one of our last trips last fall, Curtis, you had your Midge Tip, and I left mine in the truck accidentally, so I tied on a sink tip that was maybe designed for river fishing. Yeah. And I can't even tell you how many fish I lost just because it wasn't as sensitive. It was a stretchy fly line. And that fly line's great for rivers, but did not catch a lot of fish. So it's a very specific fly line just for, stillwater fishing with a very non-stretch core. That's the key there. So
favorite brook trout fly for lakes?
Favorite brook trout fly for lakes?
Chronomid Frenchie or black balance leech.
That's a good one.
Yeah, something black and jiggy. That black diamond leech, the black and red diamond leech is really good.
Yep.
Steve Quinn says, so what are you watching while fishing the Midge Tip? Is it a fill or is it a fill thing? It can be a fill thing. You're also watching what's called the swing tip. So when you're fishing Stillwater and you're retrieving flies, you always want to keep your rod tip down, either just barely off the surface or even under the surface. With the Midge Tip, I usually like to have it maybe 6 or 7 inches off the water, the rod tip that is. So you have what's called the swing tip, from the fly line extending from the rod tip to the water, has a little angle, a little bow to it.
Yeah.
And if you hold that off, and most of the time we hand twist retrieve when we're midge tipping, you can also strip and do slow strips. But either way, you're watching for that little swing tip when you stop it, which they often eat when you pause it. You move it, you move it, you move it. If they eat it while you're moving, you're going to feel it. If you stop it, that little swing tip all of a sudden tightens up and you just strip set and you're on to those fish. So you're watching that. In really calm conditions, you might even watch the floating portion of the fly line out of ways, because all of a sudden it'll just dart a little bit.
Up, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So you have a feel and also some visual cues either way. What else do we have? Somebody asked if we've tried fishing for pike. Yes, we have. Tips. I don't have a lot of tips for you on pike on the fly. Fish fly a rod heavy enough to do it. Yeah. Wire leader, all the basics. I mean, pike you could do a whole podcast on that as well. There's a fly I've had best success with for pike. It's called Monster Magic. I think Chip Cromartie tied it. It's on the internets if you want to check that
on the interwebs. So he says, are minnow patterns not a good go-to fly on Stillwater?
If there's minnows that they're eating,
it's
a good one.
That's a really good segue into knowing what the fish eat in your local water.
Yep.
I mean, that's why the humongous is so good, because it could be a leech, it could be a minnow, it could be a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. But like at Strawberry, we know that they eat chubs a lot, and so the baby fat minnow was born there, and it crushes there. So the answer is yes and no. Sometimes not.
It depends. Yeah.
So.
Let's see. Oh, George, very astute. Says Curtis's voice is getting better. Not quite Cheech's, LOL.
Today we will talk about the Stillwater techniques in episode 17 of the Shop Talk podcast. You can cut that out and put it in the front.
Oh, man, that's going to happen.
Speaking of sound bites, we might need to play the Brigham sound bite. I'll find it.
Or Brigham. What else do we have? Give me some info on the Midge Tip line. Man, we've just been hammering that one home. I don't know. What info do you need, Donnie? Maybe call the shop if we haven't answered your question yet. What are some common casting mistakes one might not be aware of? Well, casting on Stillwater is a place where, or Stillwater, I should say, is a place where casting is a big deal. Being able to cast far away from your position, whether you're on the bank or in a boat, is a huge advantage. As Mr. Spine Dave knows, we know who that is. So casting a long way, everybody would argue in the river, I cast far enough to catch fish. Yes, you do. But if you cast better, if you cast more accurately, more efficiently, you can deal with wind, you catch more fish, river or lake. In a lake, that's multiplied.
Yeah.
Just think, whether you're on the bank or in a tube or in a boat, there's an area around where you are where there are no fish, because you're making noise, your boat's making noise, they see your boat, they see your fins, they hear your trolling motor, whatever.
Big time.
So sometimes that could be 20 or 30 feet outside of your boat. So if you're fishing and you can only cast 40 feet, you're showing your flies to fish for about 10 feet.
Yeah. And we've proven in scientific experimentation that our presence in especially float tube water gets rid of the fish.
Yeah, they gone.
So casting as far as you can. We notice a big difference in when you fish in competitions and you're in a boat with another competitor, and that competitor can cast 50 or 60 feet, and I can cast 80 or 90 or 100 feet. It's rare that short casting angler can outfish you, because you're just covering so much more water, and you're getting you're showing your flies to fish before that guy can at all. So there's a huge advantage. Take the competition out of it. Just fishing for fun, catching more fish is always more fun.
It's
and if
awesome.
you cast farther, so casting mistakes on a lake, most commonly people take their back cast too low, which means
you're hitting the water.
Yeah, when you make a back cast that's too low, your trajectory sends the line down into the water, and then you water load, which is also bad on Stillwater. If you're a water loader, you need to knock that off, because you're costing yourself a lot of fish. You want to keep all your line in the air, all the time, and then lay it down with as little impact to the water as possible.
Sometimes I get in the habit of water loading a little bit too much, especially if there's wind. And it's usually because I'm getting frustrated and my cast just goes crazy and my arms clear up in the air.
I thought you said you were really good just like 8 minutes ago.
Well, I am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What else? They want to know the exact makeup of a Midge Tip line. So it depends on the brand, but you're pretty much talking about a floating fly line that's, say the SA, it's designed on the MPX taper, right? The emerger tip. And it's got a very low stretch core. It's a mono core on that line. And then it goes to a very short section of intermediate sink tip.
So if you start at the fishing end, it's 5 feet of clear sinking tip.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the line floats.
Yeah.
That's the nuts and bolts of it. They changed the tapers, as Cheech was mentioning, they're designed to handle multiple fly rigs and cast at distance and turn things over. So it's not the MPX taper is a little bit more aggressive turnover type taper.
Yeah, and I think the most critical things are that it's a non-stretch line, and that you're using the proper type of leader to be able to get down that we just explained a few minutes ago.
And that plays into another question: is what would you do if you change your flies in depth on a lake and still aren't catching trout? I mean, that plays into it. One of the reasons I like the Midge Tip is that you can change the leader length and fly selection to greatly change where you're fishing and how long you're fishing in a certain depth.
Yes.
Very often you could be 5 feet above the fish, or whatever it may be. So you can adjust that by, number one, lengthening your total leader length if you had 3 flies, so you can kind of fish more of the water column. And then if you're not getting into them, maybe try a heavier fly on the point, casting further, letting the flies settle longer.
A full sink line.
Or you go to a full sink line. That's one of the things too. Kieran Jenkins, who he came over last year. He's from the UK, a tournament guy, and works with Fulling Mill. And I asked him, just out of curiosity, how many lines he takes on the water. And he said around 40. So he's changing lines before he changes flies. I mean, that's not going to be common for everybody, but it is worth a consideration. Could be your depth, could be your retrieve.
Yeah, there's lots of variables there. One thing that's nice about a Midge Tip, the Midge Tip, I guess I look at it as kind of a Euro nymphing setup it's not a Euro nymphing, it's totally different, but it allows you to do the same things that a Euro nymphing setup or any nymphing setup does for that matter. The Midge Tip allows you to fish really shallow. If you fished all unweighted or buoyant flies, you can fish it just right at the surface or just under. If you fish it with medium weight flies, you can fish a little deeper. If you fish it with heavyweight flies, you can fish really deep. So by using the same line and leader setup, you change flies and you can quickly go through, up to about 20 feet of depth. So if you're trying to fish deeper than that, the Midge Tip's not the line for you. But if you're going to fish pretty shallow, the Midge Tip's really great. And again, this is not, you don't need a Midge Tip for trolling. If you're trolling behind a pontoon and you're running a motor all day, you don't really need a Midge Tip.
Yeah.
It's a retrieving line. It's designed to move flies. What else? Do we think buying a Midge Tip is worth over just using normal sinking line? Yes, they're completely different. A normal sinking line, the whole line sinks and it pulls horizontal. The Midge Tip, most of it floats and pulls more vertical.
Which is a huge deal.
Yeah, I mean, but at the same time, there's really no best a lot of the time. It's all about how you're going to present your flies. Sometimes it might be best, sometimes it might not be. So who knows?
What else do we have on here?
Running out
Fish
of time
balance
a little bit.
leeches with a Midge Tip or bobber. Yeah, you can do both.
Yep.
We got that one. Poly leaders. 6 foot poly leader would be similar to a Midge Tip. It just creates a hinge point casting wise, and it's hang up in your guides. It would work. It's just not
not ideal.
You can also use a 6 or 10 foot sink tip to your floating line for streamer fishing. It's a pain in the butt. If it's the only thing you have available, it's better than not. But if you can dedicate a line to it, there are advantages to not adding the loop to loops.
I would actually just rather use a normal floating line and just add a long leader than have that.
Yeah.
So
are you saying 3 to 6 feet of Midge Tip in the water? The Midge Tip is a whole fly line.
yeah, I think we just covered that whole makeup.
Lots
of
of
the
people
fly.
asking about Lakers. Lakers are not too sacred, Phil. They're not very easy to catch.
Talk to them about how long it takes you to get follows and hookups. The action versus the casting when you're Laker fishing.
Laker fishing is like musky fishing, only I think worse. It's limited to certain times of year, and most of the time, I caught a fish the other day. I caught my personal best Laker, a little over 30 pounds, and I fished all day. I left my house at 5 in the morning, and I got back home at about 10 minutes to midnight, and I caught one fish all day, and that's after chasing them regularly for about 4 years. So that's not the first one I've caught, but I mean, I've used all the information that I've gathered over the last 4 years, and I still caught one fish. So you see people posting on Instagram and Facebook, and you think, I want to go do that, and that's cool. You should go try it. It'd be fun. But keep in mind, we've had lots of customers come in and say, I'm going to go do that, and I go, cool. Talk to me after you've tried it about 50 times, and then
Well, and to get outfitted.
We'll see if you've caught one yet. It's not very fast fishing.
8 hours of driving.
Yeah.
And you got to have a boat to be able to cover the water. I mean, it's helpful, of course.
What else do we have in here? What would you do? Change your flies. Okay, we covered that one.
Most memorable Stillwater trout you've ever caught or lost?
Well, recently for me would be the Laker.
Yeah. How big was that one?
A little over 30 pounds.
A little over 30 pounds. So it weighed about half as much as Lance weighs.
I wish. I'm as fat as I've ever been.
What about you, Curtis?
Oh, man. Well, that's a good question.
The one that swam out of the net? Maybe like a 10-pound brown?
Oh, that was a memorable one. That was a big brown.
Mostly because I lost it.
At the net. We got it, though.
Yeah.
We've caught some really good cuts on strawberry. Those are so fun.
Yeah.
Good
ones. And that when they're eating, they're just eating all the time.
Probably in Argentina, we went to a lake called Lago Tromen, and super aquamarine, crystal clear water. And you can see them coming from a mile away, and they'll eat dry flies.
That was, for me, that one comes up. I had a 17, 18-inch brook trout blow up
crazy.
a
That was the coolest take
pattern.
I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our guide, good old Gonzalito, he looks down for a sec. He's messing with the boat.
He missed it.
And I threw a long cast, and this fish jumped out of the water about 2 feet.
That was crazy.
And usually when they do that, they miss your fly, but
he got it.
He ate
Stuck
it.
So good.
Yeah, it was cool.
What else?
Gonzalo thought we fell out of the boat, I think, because we both
like, "What's
freaked
going on?"
out.
Yeah.
He looks over, what's going on?
Would you ever fish a 2/8 10-foot rod? Yes, Euro nymphing all the time. In a lake, not really.
Yeah, not in a lake.
Stillwater fishing for carp. What are your setups? I like a 9 to 10-foot 6-weight for carp. I prefer floating line.
Speaking of which, I had a memorable carp a couple years ago. It took a bionic ant on the surface.
Carp on dries are really fun.
Sweet, yeah.
Any tips on places to fish mouse flies in Stillwaters? Yes, near the banks.
Near the banks. It doesn't have to be in the middle of the night either.
No. And actually, I was kind of tongue in cheek because I think he's asking for like places. But you don't have to fish them near the banks. You can catch them. I've thrown them at our local lake we've referenced several times at Strawberry, out at over like 60 feet of water, and they'll come and eat it.
Yeah.
One thing also is, in my experience, for every one mouse fish you could catch, you could probably catch 35 other fish.
Yeah, it's fun to catch one on a mouse, but after you've knocked that off, go back to catching real fish.
Yeah.
You know what? We need to have a little bit of fun with Brig before we end this.
Uh-oh, did you find it?
I found it. So Brigham was filming Josh fish, and he was fishing an ant pattern in early season during a beta hatch. And Brigham provides the commentary. Let's see if we can find it. Brigham's not Canadian too. So
that's a big brown, bro. Yeah.
Wait, we gotta play that again.
That's
Big
a
brown.
Rexburg Especial.
Dude, that's a big brown, bro. Yeah.
Oh, good
That's
old
a
Brig.
big brown,
bro. It's Canadian Idaho.
And our friend Pablo turned that into one of our intro clips, which is on our latest video.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's another thing through this whole craziness. We have been filming, and we have been we do have a bunch of videos we want to release, but the issue is we're going through materials so fast that we can't really release them because we'd be missing half the material. So
and then we get complaints that we don't have what we just posted.
Yeah, so bear with us on that. We're going to get back on that train. We have a whole bunch of videos that are going to be coming down the pike, but
stay tuned. They'll be good.
Right.
Well, hour's up.
Yeah.
The hour's up. We really appreciate you all tuning in.
Yep.
If you don't know, we have a fly shop in Orem, Utah.
And we're open.
We
sanitize the crap out of things.
We sanitize it so well. And we have a store site, store.flyfishfood.com. We have the social medias. We have the Instagrams. We have the Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Fly Tying with Uncle Cheech. Go and ask to join it. We'll let you in. What else?
It's about it. Get out there and try it.
Go chase some
your Stillwater on.
It's about to be high water on most of the rivers in the west, so it's a great time to go hit your local Stillwater.
Ooh, we should have started with that, right?
Yeah.
Would have been smart. We're not very smart.
In this episode, we will talk about Stillwater fishing while you're waiting for the rivers to come down. Doom, da, doom, 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 some banjo music.
Uh-oh. Do your banjo again?
Doom, da, doom, doom,
That's
doom.
terrible. You have good voices normally. That's a bad.
Dude, I'll work on
terrible.
it. I feel you. It's not my best. It's about a 6 out of 10.
3.
Okay, well,
Well,
stay tuned. We'll keep the info coming as we can.
adios.
Thanks for tuning in.